that struck me the most is that he had small feet. And normally when guys have small feet and they are that tall, they lack a little bit in balance. But, you know, other than that, the only unusual thing that struck me about him was his accent. I hadn't really been around anyone with an Australian accent, and to now have someone that's part of my team that I'm hearing this strange accent all the time, then that became something for me to get used to a bit. He had kind of lost that confidence within himself as to, you know, could he really, you know, play in this league? Could he sustain it for 82 games? You know, could he ever win a championship? So sometimes it's about being in the right position to be successful, and I don't think he was set up early on in his career to have a lot of success, and you know, I think that's why he kind of lost a little bit of his self-esteem and his confidence. But you know, I think it all changed once he came to Chicago and, you know, started to, you know, fit in on his own. In the early days when Luc first came, you know, we had high expectations for him. It was an opportunity for him to come in and really step right in. Be a starting center for a defending championship team. So the expectations were immediately kind of put up on him to sort of do well, if I could say that. And, you know, he was a high draft pick. When Luc came to Chicago, I felt that Phil wanted Luc to be a bit different. He wanted Luc to have a nasty side of him. He looked for Luc to be a little bit more aggressive. And Luc was a very gentle, nice person by nature. But Phil needed that side of him to come out at certain times, to try to be more of an intimidator, to knock somebody down, to maybe send a message. And none of that really was Luc's demeanor. It was more to help you up than to knock you down. Me and Luc really bonded. That's what I can say about our relationship. And we had a very good relationship both on and off the basketball court. You know, he's a bit of a joker to some degree, like myself. So me and him was able to hit it right off. I think a lot of players found it a little bit difficult. Michael brings a little bit of a different type of pressure to the game. And I think a lot of the players that was, you know, had came there and gotten very comfortable, realized that they had to go back and restart. We're not just walking into Scottie's house anymore. It's Michael's and Scottie's house, and we have to sort of change how we're doing things around here as far as our comfort zone, and, you know, give a little bit of respect in different ways that, you know, we had gotten comfortable doing.
Today, Michael Jordan at age 32 tries to accomplish what no one else truly has in team sports history.
The Bulls needed Michael Jordan to be successful, no doubt in my mind. I needed his personality, his demeanor, and I needed his aggression that he brought day in and day out. It was not an aggression in my eye, but more of a drive that, you know, helped us to be successful, not just him, but me, the team, the organization, Luc. I think we all saw that he was a different creature in terms of how competitive and how driven and just how he went about things. But I think it was something that we all jumped on and enjoyed it, and I guess in some sense wanted to be framed in that sort of way as a team, you know. That was sort of what had gotten me and Michael 3 championships, because we was not really, we weren't meant to be that way. And I say that even about Michael. He probably wasn't meant to be that way, but the type of trail that he had to blaze to get a championship probably made him want people on his team that were willing to fight for him. And in that sense, he sort of put himself in a position each and every day where teammates felt like that they were being challenged by him. And that wasn't anything that I think he intentionally did. I just think it was the stardom that he had, that when these other guys came into his world after, you know, 10 years in the league, 3 championships, you know, Michael Jordan is the biggest thing in the game. And now you have a chance to be a part of that. As other players, they felt like that they were walking on eggshells. And, you know, that's just how they felt initially, I think. But I think as the days grew longer and, you know, we went into several seasons, their comfort zone became something that they realized that, oh, he was like that, but it wasn't that bad, you know what I'm saying? Oh, I see why he's like that. The intensity of our second three-peat was much bigger than the first. We were a much more polarized team. Michael Jordan had made his second scene, you know, on the championship level. We were back in the finals. We had one of the best records in 1996. So we were a bit of a circus at that time. It was fun to be a part of that team, but those guys were ready. You know, not only did Michael make a big comeback that year, but we got Dennis, who joined our team that year. So it was a bit of a team that was, you know, going from, you know, trying to, you know, maybe get back to contending for a title to a team that's now, you know, we're expected to win the title. So everything shifts now is that, we're not hunting anymore. We're being hunted again. So it became a little bit of a circus for us on the road, and it was a lot of fun. Guys really embraced it because we knew, especially, our foreign guys like Bill Winnington, who's a Canadian, and Luc, Australian, they knew that it was a very special season for them. It was their first ride, as far as a championship. He had a great touch for shooting the basketball, and that was one of the strengths that he brought to the game. He had the ability to shoot the ball from outside, and at that time we would consider that being able to stretch a defense and give guys the opportunity, like myself or Michael, whoever he played with at that time, the opportunity to drive the lanes. It was important that we tried to have some guys on the floor that could really meet Shaq's intensity, but try to stay out of foul trouble and try to be effective and make Shaq have to work on the other end. So we used a lot of pick and roll with Luc, and trying to keep Shaq in pick and roll situations and utilizing Luc's ability to step out and shoot the basketball. So he was very valuable for us in terms of just using his basketball savvy and being able to have space the floor, making passes out of our triangle offense. That's something that we felt like was one of the strengths that Luc brought to our team when we had traded for him. I think he was someone that Tex Winter, who was offensive coordinator, had huge praises for Luc, his ability to see the floor and make the bounce pass out of the post. So it was something that Luc had embraced. Every big man wants to be known as a great passer. We're finishing up our West Coast trip, and we were going to be going into the playoffs. And Luc decided to go surfing. He had one of his Australian Day flashbacks or something, and he went out in LA and went surfing. And the next day he shows up to practice, and we see him, and he's got a sling on his arm. He had broke his collarbone. And that was probably one time that I remember something really bad happening, or something really bad that Luc did, because it really disappointed us a little bit. But in understanding Luc and understanding his culture and where he's from, it was nothing for him. It's like, jumping on a bicycle and taking a bike ride. So for our organization and some of the teammates, it kind of went deep, but for me, I kind of understood that, he was just a kid wanting to have some fun, and things just kind of went bad for him. We were all looking to escape from it. It wasn't like we were ever embraced and felt like that the organization really wanted us to be there and everybody was happy, and it was just never that kind of marriage. It was almost like we were like trying to show them, yes, we can still do it, but then they weren't satisfied with it, So I think as far as looking at the breakup, I think for me, I was kind of ready to get away from it. So we had created our own environment there. It was very comfortable. And now to move and, change environments, change climates, teammates. It was a bit of a difference, and you have to say it's never going to be the same, but you have to make the best of the situation. And I wasn't happy when I went to Houston. I thought I was going to be happy, and I felt like that I put myself around people that I could be successful with, but as they always say, the grass isn't always green on the other side, and it truly wasn't where I wanted to be, and I did what I did to change my situation. Wasn't a happy situation for everybody, but for me, I had been in Chicago, I had been unhappy, and I said I wasn't gonna put myself in a position where I wasn't gonna be happy, and I was gonna do things differently going forward. But I can understand for Luc, it was a bit difficult because we had gotten, so acclimated and comfortable playing in the triangle offense, and it became something that, we were just comfortable doing and comfortable playing with each other, that when you go to other places, then they can be able to expose some of your weaknesses and not play to your strengths. So that sometimes can start to make people look at you a little bit differently, and that cuts into your playing time, and that starts to shorten your career. He just never got back to being the player that he was once he left Chicago. It was very difficult, and injuries started to really take its toll. And they got these young players coming up where I would say right around that time when the lockout kicked in, the whole game changed. The game became younger. I would say a bit faster, not as fast as it is today, but they decide to, I think, do less of the hand checking and things like that, and the three-point shot just became more of a go-to for a lot of teams, and analytics became a big, huge play in today's game, and they went differently, and for me, it was time for me to move on. I think we all build up a certain aggression that we keep inside of us. It's a competitive fire, it's that competitive drive. And once we leave the game, we have to find ways to release it. That's sort of my take on what I felt that I had to do when I left the game. It's just to find another way to be competitive, whether it's working out and trying to continue to look good from a mental and a physical standpoint, to working on my golf game and trying to compete, from that standpoint. But yeah, there's a competitive drive that we have to somehow figure out how to channel it a different way when we leave the game. But I don't think we have to figure out how to change who we are. Being on the basketball court never changed who I was. I just had a different level of competitiveness when I was on that court, that it changed me for that moment, but not really who I am.